How's everybody today? I wanted to build a video on how to do a mounted shooting blank. Typically, for those of you that shoot mounted shooting with black powder, you use a blank similar to this that I have here. It's going to be a 45 long Colt blank with a rosebud crimp on top. Now, when you're doing that, this is a discharged blank. It splits the brass, rendering the brass unusable. So for what I'm wanting to show is how to do a blank that you can use the brass repeatedly for, so that you can practice multiple times. To do this, I'll show you how I do them with a Dillon 550 progressive press. Okay, so with the primers that I use, I typically use CCI primers. You can buy them at Walmart. They're the number 300s. They are about the cheapest primers that I've found. So what we'll do is with the Dillons, you buy a primer tray, take your primers out of the box, put them in your flip tray, and that'll flip them over. I've spilled these once already, so you want to be careful when you're flipping them over. So you'll take your primers that are upside down, so you can't use your tube. Put the lid on, flip the tray, and now they're ready to start picking up. I do and have used other trays, plastic trays. They tend to bounce a little bit more when you're picking them up in this manner with the tube. And you'll put all of your primers in the tube. Okay, so all the primers are loaded in the tube. Now we're going to fill up our primer tube on the Dillon Progressive. Okay, so our primer tube is filled and we're ready to start there. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to put our plate on. I have a plate already preset, but I'll go through and explain each stage and each station what it does and how it does. I have made this. This is a regular standard throw. Put an aluminum cylinder tube on the top, because aluminum is not going to conduct static electricity like plastic would. Dillon makes a phenomenal powder throw, but for the black powder I've chosen to go with this, and I made it myself. They're about $130 to buy one that's made for black powder, and I just got an old powder charge, modified the bottle so it fit on top, and that's what I use for my powder charge. Okay, so the Dillon is set now. It's ready to start. So we're going to start by loading up the press with the materials that we need. I'm not going to talk a lot about the materials that I use. Everybody's free to choose and get what materials they want. I'll mention a little bit of what it is that I use. But again, that's going to be dependent upon where you can get stuff locally. Where we live, it's difficult to get black powder. Where you live, it may not be, and it may be. The keys of the black powder I'll hit when we dump powder and I go through the powder. Okay, so we've got the brass. This is all previously fired, previously tumbled. There is an art to getting these clean. When you finish shooting them, they do end up being very tarnished, and to be able to get them to where you can tumble them nice and pretty does take a few steps, and that could be something I can deal with later. So I'll grab a handful of brass, put it in the tray, get it set for the press. Now, when we're dealing with this press, there's a couple prep steps we're going to have to do before we're actually ready to start doing our reloading. I want to make sure we're throwing the right amount of powder. I've torn a lot of blanks apart, and with black powder, if you're familiar with black powder, you can't always get the same charge every time. So I've got this set at about 32 grains. I like to just check to make sure that's about where it's at. I've got the scale, I've weighed my powder. I'm at 32 grains is what this is going to throw on an average. But again, all of them are going to vary depending on how much time it sat, how hard you do the throw, and so that's where your powder is going to vary. So don't get bent out of shape if you're not throwing 32 grains every single time you drop your powder. Okay, so with black powder, there's multiple brands. I try to grab what I can get. Again, this is for practice. This isn't a competition. The most important thing with the powder is that you get a 1F powder. That is the critical part of the powder. Kicks, GoX, Swits, those different brands is up to you and what you can get locally available. So I'm going to dump a bunch of powder in the powder measure. Be very, very careful with your powder. Static electricity can get it to go off, and it can cause a lot of problems with making a mess in your house. Okay, so first stage on the Dillon press is going to be your deprime. I've already deprimed my brass, but I still run it through the stage just because I don't want to take the die out. But if you weren't and you were going to do everything at once, then your first stage would be your deprime prime. Okay, so we changed cameras so you can get a better angle of the press. So we're going to take our brass and slide it into stage 1. You come down. Now again, on the Dillons, their primer, automatic primer system, press forward, brass is primed. Now we're going to slide to the next step. New brass in, I'm going to come up. Now's when I got my powder throw. I'm going to throw my charge. Come down, press forward, rotate. Now I'm going to take my wad. I've got these wads. I have it set so that I don't put a filler in. The fillers make the guns a little bit dirtier. So what I've done is I put my wad on here, and I've got in this powder die here, I've got a 44 mag powder funnel that is going to compress this load and compress the wad. So again, coming down, and listen, you'll hear a crunch. You want a little bit of a crunch when you're loading this because that's going to compress that powder. Make my throw for my powder. Prime, rotate, I'm ready for my next round. Wad on, come down, make my powder throw, prime. Now this stage here, as it comes up, I'm making a little bit of a bevel here so that I can get my wad in without causing a problem with it. So this is going to be a crimping die. It's going to straighten the wall back up again so it'll go in your cylinder. Again, as I rotate, I'll put my next one in, stick my wad on, up, again there's that crunch, throw my powder, come down, and that is how you're going to run your powder, your black powder blanks. Okay, so finished product is going to look like this. It's going to have your powder recessed down inside the brass. Typically, a lot of your practice blanks you're going to get are going to be like this. The wad's going to come straight up to the top. They're going to put a filler in so that they can still get the powder compressed. You don't want to, again, go over that 32 grains. That's kind of the magic number. But I found with that filler, one, it's an extra additional step, and by doing this and just compressing your wad down in, with the Dillon you can do so because of the funnel system and the way that the press is made. You can use that 44 mag powder funnel to compress the wad down and compress your powder, giving you a good practice blank. It's relatively fast. You can load up a whole bunch of them fairly quick and store them in 45 ACP boxes. Again, there's a bunch that I loaded up. They don't take very long to load up, but that'll get you on your way and get you ready to practice.